Amy Derrickson. I am the area representative for our Northern Virginia South area. And this is the third part of a series that I'm hosting entitled Equipped for the Journey. And today's part 3 is titled CC and the College Bound Child. And what my goal is with this series is to just equip and encourage parents who are homeschooling with CC that whether your child has particular gifts, whether they have particular challenges, or whether they're on a particular trajectory with their education and with their life goals, that we want to just share our experience, share our knowledge and our resources with you so that you feel encouraged and equipped for your own journey. So before we get into the details of homeschooling a college-bound child with CC, I would like for these two ladies, Erin LaMont and Emily Bradley, to introduce themselves and just share a little bit about their own journey with their college-bound child. So Erin, would you start us off and share a little bit about yourself and your homeschooling journey?
Sure. So my name is Erin LaMont. I have been a part of CC since 2010. I have one daughter, Ellie, and we use CC with her from first grade all the way up through Challenge 4. So yeah, this was kind of our kindergarten year. We just kind of, hey, what do we need? What can we, can we do this on our own? And then we realized, like so many families who were overwhelmed by the thought of doing classical education, but the thought of doing classical education with others was a really great thing for us, and we were lonely, so we needed community. I think we thought we joined CC for the education. We realized that what we needed more than anything was the community. So we knew probably that college was going to be Ellie's path. So when we got to Challenge 2 and CC Plus was an option for her, we started enrolling her in the CC Plus courses, and we did that all the way through Challenge 4, and she graduated from Challenge 4 with 49 credits through CC Plus. And those, she took those into her education at Liberty University. She was a writing major and a linguistics minor. So she graduated from Liberty in 2 years. And she is now currently working on her master's. She has 1 year left on her master's. She's working on that online through the University of Illinois, and that is a master's in library and information science. So she should graduate with that in December, and her hope is to be a children's librarian in a public library setting.
That's fantastic. And a little bit later, we're going to get into a little bit of detail about those CC Plus courses that you mentioned. But let's chat with Emily for a few minutes. Tell us about yourself and your journey with your college-bound child.
Yeah, I have a lot of crossover with Erin, except our son started when he was 4 with CC, and so he went from the very beginning all the way through Challenge 4. And he is now a freshman at the University of Austin. I have 5 other children, and I don't know that all of them will be on this college-bound path, but my son definitely was. He also took some CC Plus courses, but his college doesn't take any transfer credits, so none of those transferred in. But he's really enjoying his first year.
That's awesome. Great. Where is he, Emily?
He's at the University of Austin,
which
is different from the University of Texas at Austin.
Gotcha. Okay, fantastic. The next thing that I just want to chat about briefly, again, before we get into the details, the what and the how of CC with the college-bound child, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about some whys that we think are so important for Christian homeschooling parents to consider and reflect on. And the first thing that has just been so important to me as I have this conversation with parents in my community visits is just our complete reliance on the Lord's sovereignty. We easily confess that the Lord is sovereign, but we often don't live like we really believe that. So I just want to assure you in this journey that you are not big enough to thwart God's plan for your child. And what verse comes to mind with that concept is from Job chapter 42, verse 2. I know that you, Lord, can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. So I just want to start this whole conversation through that framework, that the Lord is so sovereign over all of the details. And sometimes the story, the chapters of the story that we imagine in our own mind for our child, that is not the way the Lord chooses to write our child's history. And so just really leaning into that and relying on resting in the Lord's sovereignty for the path that he has intended for our children. Ladies, do you all have any thoughts?
I was going to say, I think along those lines, when your child is 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 or even 14, you don't necessarily know what the path is, what it's going to look like, and where you're going to go. I mean, as parents, we have lots of ideas of what we think the path should be, but yes. God has other plans. Many are the plans of the Lord's, of man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. That's Proverbs 19:21, I think. But I think the thing that we need to remember, and another mom who was farther along the journey than I was, I remember her telling me this. She said, whether or not your kid goes to college is not really the question here as far as what you're getting with your education with CC. CC is going to prepare your child to go to college, whether they decide to go to college or not. So know that you are preparing your child for a college education. Sure. It doesn't mean that they have to go in that direction, but if they decide to go in that direction, they will be very much ready for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Emily, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is, so my son's a freshman, like I mentioned, and so we just went through this journey last year, so it's really fresh in our mind and heart. And what we encountered after all these years of homeschooling was, a real look at our own hearts as parents. And you realize that, you had some kind of stuff in the basement about, homeschooling and what the purpose of it was. And we had to kind of confront the fact that after all this time and after all we said, like, we are homeschooling to create virtue. We believe that education is a way to create virtue and to create good choices throughout life. But then when it came down to it, we were really looking for the validation from different colleges and saying, we would love to have your son, and oh, here's the scholarship, and oh, here's that. And we were really pleased with the outcome of the journey, but there was a lot of pain along the way as different people said, no, we don't want Luke because of XYZ. And we were like, but he is really educated. That, like, you don't understand the caliber of his education. And we just really had to say, like, wow, this is not about what someone else says about my child and validating homeschooling. This is about, like, God's plan for them. Right. And this is about, we have to just know in our bones that the education that we have partnered with CC to give this child is the main thing, regardless of what, institutions say.
I really like that. And Emily, just to confirm with you, it wasn't, your son Luke, he had CC plus, he had college level classes, and if I remember correctly, you also shared with me that his SAT scores were really high.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just goes to confirm that really, just like the verse that Erin shared, it really is the path that the Lord determines for our children.
Yeah.
And yes, that can be so humbling for us as parents, especially as homeschooling moms. And so I really appreciate that perspective that you're sharing.
Well, and I think also as Northern Virginia homeschooling moms, we really get stuck in the comparison trap. And
So
maybe it's
true.
not just a Northern Virginia thing. It's, it's a human thing. But we do have a tendency to compare, oh, well, this person's child is doing this, so my child should be doing that. And that we can't live in that. That's just going to set our hearts up for failure.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought that up too, because it is very easily to get sucked into Satan's lies and that lie of shame as a homeschooling mom when you're looking around and first of all, these are the expectations of homeschooling children. And then you look around and it appears that everybody else's family and their children are squared away. They're doing all of their schoolwork, they're well behaved, they're this, they're that. And so we often, it's isolating, and we will, out of that sense of shame, isolate ourselves and get further sucked into that comparison trap. So, and that's enough. I've tried to be more and more transparent as the years have gone on and as my own children have grown older, and the challenges in even parenting have grown more complicated, just to be transparent and share that, because that the fellowship that we rely on with one another, it's so beneficial in our parenting. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, let's go ahead and shift gears now. Again, for the parent and the student wondering about the path to college, we know that there are many ways. We can go directly from CC into a traditional four-year college, whether it's public, whether it's private. Children can go to community college for their core credits and then transfer into college or university. But let's just take a few minutes to talk about some of the other college options that are also available to our classically educated children that may not be as widely, that people may not be aware of. Emily, do you have ideas on this?
Yeah, so this is something we kind of brainstormed, and that is that, the path that my son took is very different to what Amy, your son, is doing, and Erin, what your daughter did. And my son had taken some CC Plus classes, and we did think, oh, it would be cool if these transferred, and he's going to take some APs not classes, but tests, and that's going to be great. And ultimately, the place that God led him to is sort of something different from that. And I would call it, I think it's very much a continuation of what we do at CC, which is like, highly prizing education. It's very classical in nature. And they don't take transfer credits, like I mentioned, because they have their own core curriculum. And I think there are several schools like this. So he's at the University of Austin, which they don't build a classical school, but they truly are. Then there's, St. John's in Annapolis or Santa Fe. Patrick Henry College is a little bit like this, and there are some others, but with kind of their own core curriculum where they're not always very accepting of send us all your outside credits. They really
Sure.
have an educational, not a package, but
A
something
plan.
they want to impart to students.
Mm-hmm.
They want students to take part in. And my son, we didn't know this, but he ended up at that type of school, and I think he is really well suited for it. It's kind of like a little bit of like a doubling down on what they're doing in CC. So they read so many classical authors, and now in his freshman year, he's reading Thucydides, who wrote the first history book, and Plato's Republic. And so it's
That's
very
awesome.
much like take what you learned. Like they were supposed to read the Iliad over the summer because they read the Odyssey, as part of their first term. So this is like a real way of like continuing what they've done in CC, and we know that was going to be the path for him, but it was, and he's really just loving it and is very well prepared for it through CC.
That's great. And so he's really on a trajectory of continuing his classical education throughout college.
Yeah. And when he got to the college, he said, oh my gosh, he described it. He said this is like CC but on steroids.
That's
Just
awesome.
it's like he was like CC
Mhm.
was like a drop in the bucket, and this is just, kind of an
That's
explosion of discussions,
yeah.
of intense reading, of, so
That's really neat. And that's so neat that he just feels that sense of belonging in that environment. When my son graduated this last year as well, after CC was over, he shared with me, a couple months later, how much he missed CC because he missed it. And I said, what is it that you miss, hon? He missed the schoolwork. Never heard that in 12 years. But he especially missed the conversations then when he went into class with his classmates about the schoolwork that they had done, just the richness of those conversations. So that is just so neat that that Luke is continuing that. And so you mentioned, that my son, this is my Jack, he's my youngest, also recently graduated. His plan for college is very different. He does not want to take the 4 years or however many years of college out of away from living his life. He wants to step right, and he already has, step right into the working world. He loves sales, and so that's what he's been doing since the summer that he actually, prior to graduation, he's been doing sales of some form over the last few years. And so he just wants to really be in the working world, but he wants the degree. And so he's looking for an online fast track solution for getting that undergraduate degree, really more as just for lack of better words, a check it off trajectory of a college education. And so, a couple things to bear in mind with that. I, as his mom, we know that a college degree, that piece of paper, doesn't necessarily capture the learning, the education, and the readiness of our children. And so, but it will, however, often open up doors for jobs and for careers. And so, for him, he's that's his motivation there. And so there are different institutions that will cater to that kind of college-bound student as well. There are schools that you can CLEP out. It's a particular test. It's called a CLEP test that you take. There's a whole list of different subjects that you can take CLEP tests for and accrue those credits. And then there are schools that will accept those CLEP test credits toward your degree. Some examples of that, the one that my own son is working through is Western Governors University. There are others, Thomas Edison State University, Charter Oak State College. There are a handful that have a very similar program to that. So that's another avenue for that college degree for the child who does not want to take the 4 years and physically be in college. And so, Erin, your own daughter had her own path to college. Can you share that again?
She kind of jokes that she did a speed run through college because she got there and she finished in 2 years, and she's almost done with her master's now 2 years later. And people are like, wait, aren't you away at school? And everybody gets really confused when they talk to her. But it was definitely one of those things where we recognize, and I think, so CC partners with Southeastern University in Florida for CC Plus, and Southeastern recognized, they looked at the things that our children were already doing in the challenge program, and they said, this is actually some college level work if you're actually completing all of it. So why don't we figure out a way to give you college credit so that way you don't just have to come and essentially do a repeat of everything that that you have done. So so that's why we went the CC Plus route. The price was about, it was similar to what you would get at a community college, but we were still able to maintain the classical education, which you won't typically get if you send your child off to a community college for a dual enrollment sort of thing. So she transferred her credits into Liberty, but you can actually, through CC Plus, you can get an associate's degree and take that right into SEU or some other university. But all Challenge 4 grads are automatically accepted to Southeastern University in Florida, even if you never did a CC Plus class, is my understanding on that. So that is really cool. I am also an SEU grad because I got my master's from SEU. So I actually went down and I saw the campus for my own graduation. I was like, oh, this is a really nice school. But she was already graduating at Liberty in a couple of weeks when I graduated with my master's. So that really wasn't an option anymore. But it was super cool. So that's kind of a plug and play path, if you will, for our students in Challenge. If the Challenge workload is, for some kids, that Challenge workload is just right up their alley, and the CC Plus then winds up being a really good option for them, if they kind of know what they're looking to do next with it. So yeah.
But to piggyback off of that, Erin, even if our children don't necessarily know what they want to do. For example, my third child, by the time he was coming into Challenge 2, he was fairly certain that he wanted to pursue a trade. He wants to work with his hands. That's what he finds joy in. But at the same time, through our conversations, we thought, well, if at one point down the road, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years down the road, you decide you do want to go back to college, if you knock out some of these college credits now while you're in high school through CC Plus, that's less time that you'll spend later. When you've got a job, you've potentially got a family. And so that's what he did, even knowing that at the time he had no intention of going to college. He took as many CC Plus courses as he was able to during Challenge 2, and then some more in both Challenges 3 and 4, just to open up that. I see your doggy. Just to keep those options open for down the road, just in case.
Yeah.
So it's it's just a great partnership that we have with that institution. And I did verify with the liaison between CC and SCU that all Challenge 4 graduates, regardless of whether they previously took CC Plus classes before, all Challenge 4 graduates are automatically accepted into SEU. There is no application process. There are no SAT and ACT score requirements. It's automatic acceptance into the school. So that, for a lot of families, that can just be very encouraging.
Yeah.
So one other thing I just want to touch on real quick, Erin, you mentioned you briefly compared CC Plus concurrent enrollment with dual enrollment from a community college. And I know we didn't really get into this, in our previous conversations, but can we just take a minute to explore the differences between, again, CC Plus concurrent enrollment and dual enrollment from a community college?
Sure. So concurrent enrollment is where the college looks at what we are offering, and they say, we're going to walk alongside you with that. So you don't have to go and take a different history class or we're going to look at CC Plus, Southeastern University has looked at what we do. Say, I'm just going to take an example class, say American history, and says, that is like what we do for American history. So we are going to take your assignments that are in your guide already, and you're going to have your parent at home is going to assess those for you on a high school level and give you a high school grade. And then we are going to have a college assessor, and I'll say assessor, not a professor, because it's not like you're sitting It's not like you do CC and then you go and you sit in front of your computer and you listen to another professor lecture, but it's a college level assessor, so somebody who has a master's in this subject and at least 18 credits at the master's level, and they will assess your child's work and offer feedback and give a grade on that at the college level. So as a parent, you will you will give the grades at the high school level. The college assessor will give them at the college level, and you will actually get a college transcript from SEU. So that is concurrent enrollment. It walks right alongside with what you're doing in your guide. You don't necessarily turn in every assignment from your guide. It's a select assignments that you will turn in. And then sometimes there are a few additional assignments that you'll have to turn in to either meet the learning objectives, or it's just really because that college assessor isn't sitting directly in your classroom with your peers and your tutor listening to the conversation that you're having. You need to write something up then later about that conversation that you actually had. So that's concurrent enrollment versus at a community college. Say if I wanted to go take American history at a community college to get a dual enrollment credit, I would go and I would just enroll in their dual enrollment. Mom could still assess what you're doing with CC for that credit, but now all of a sudden you have a different textbook that you're using to get that American history credit, and you have different assignments and all of the things, and you answer completely to that college professor, and you are sitting, in a lecture, whether that's in person or whether that's online. So it's essentially that you're taking a second history course as of that point. And typically what happens is the college course takes priority for the student, and what's happening in your CC world is really just kind of put on the back burner. So the concurrent enrollment, especially if you love what you're doing in CC, which I think most of us do as of that point, you can really dive in and focus in on that versus, hey, let me go to this modern education route with the concurrent enrollment the dual enrollment at your community college. So.
Yeah, and and each family will have to weigh the pros and the cons with their own children's decisions there. But I have often seen in classes where the students were enrolled in community college for dual enrollment, they do tend to begin to check out of their CC class conversations, because like you said, that that community college then takes priority. They're in front of a professor each week who's giving them those grades, and so oftentimes that's prioritized, and their CC work takes more of a second position to that.
And I think there's also, I think sometimes what we don't stop and think about, it's nice to have the grades at that point, dual enrollment from somebody else, and to have the extra accountability from somebody else. But what's the worldview that you're getting when you put them into the community college? Is your 10th grader ready for that, or your 11th or your 12th grader? Are they really ready for those conversations that are most likely not coming from a biblical worldview as they, look at American history or world history or, sciences or whatever the class is. So.
Right. Emily, did you have any other thoughts about that you want to add?
Yeah. Everything that Erin said. I think also, when we started in the CC Plus classes, I think a lot of people have this similar experience where it's almost not about the learning or the credit at first. It's about figuring out how the college, there's like Blackboard and there's Canvas and there's all these, you got to go to your JBOP and your Whiz-Bang to do all these things and managing the communication that comes from the professor, looking at the syllabus, organizing themselves. It's really a new level of keeping track of dates and due dates and communication from the professor. We had a lot of kind of mentoring with our son about how to communicate with a professor Like when is it okay to say, you know, I'm not happy with my grade, or I'm not happy with the way this is done. When is it appropriate to raise something, and when is it that was your fault? You missed that
Right.
and you deserve this grade. Um, so it was almost like a mini homeschooling course in just college stuff
College
and
readiness.
interacting with professors. So I mean, I would say any parent should give their child a couple of CC classes. We don't get money for saying this,
Not at
but
all.
it just,
We are
you
not
know,
Nope.
CC plus
the
representatives here.
experience itself is valuable. If you think your child will be going to college, it was a real learning curve with all that stuff. And I think now that Luke is at college, he's like, I've done this, you know, and for homeschool kids especially, I think, you know, in high school, you probably start to get that in a public school where it's like, here's your syllabus. This is, you know, stuff, not to the level of college, but I think it's helpful for homeschoolers who are used to a lot of flexibility and deadlines. And it's not that CC plus assessors have no flexibility. They definitely do. But, you know, it really is a transitional experience for them that I think is helpful.
Accountability outside of the home, away from mom. Agreed. Very
Yeah.
beneficial.
I actually I have a bit of a story with that. So obviously, you know, Ellie was a writing major, so you know she loves to write. She's a good writer. And when she took one of her first CC plus classes, it was the Western Cultural History class.
Mm-hmm.
And you know she turned in one of her first couple of papers. I don't remember when it was, but the assessor you know came back at her, and it's not that the grade wasn't a bad grade or anything, but it was, I remember looking at the comments with her, and he was like, look, I can see that you are a great writer. Like I can see that shows through in your writing, but now I want you to focus on like depth. Give me content. What are you saying here? And you know, to watch her wrestle with that, and I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I have been looking for, is just somebody else to say, look, yeah, this is great. I need more here. So to have that, I mean, it was nice for me to hear, you know, as a parent, like, yeah, this is kind of what I've been thinking, you know, along these lines also, but for her to hear it from another source, she was like, okay, I guess I really need to buckle down on this. So that was just a really nice extra level of accountability, this little bit of extra assessment, this push that came from elsewhere, and it wasn't, oh, my mom's telling me that I gotta do this kind of thing. But I will just also echo that, you know, how to communicate with, you know, your professors, with other adults, that was such a valuable skill. And it was so nice for her to be able to, you know, to have that and to sit down, you know, next to me. Okay, I need to compose this email. How do I actually do this? And, you know, what should I say? You know, in the first couple, it was, you know, mom's right here, right with you, so you can do this. But, you know, by the end, it's like, oh, yeah, you know, I'm just, you know, I'm emailing my assessor, this, that. And when she actually got to her 4-year school, she was so equipped to be able to have those conversations with those professors and really advocate for herself when she needed to. It was just a really great path for her. So
That's awesome. And I love that you brought up that Western Cultural History class, because I have just a really brief story that I want to share regarding that too. That was one of the CC Plus classes that Ethan, my third, took while he was in Challenge 2. And it's very similar thing happened with him. His assessor wanted him to dig deeper. Well, of course, I wanted him to dig deeper too. So he did. He really he started reading through all of the chapters of How Should We Then Live to really gain a better understanding of culture and that Western cultural history from the time of Christ all the way to modern America. And at the time, that CC Plus course, or all Challenge 2 CC Plus courses, they were year long. They weren't semester like they are now. So he had a whole year there of digging deeper into that, and also analyzing that alongside, you know, the Bible. Well, at the end of that year, and this is my son who had no interest in going to college, and he is now an HVAC technician full-time, and loves it. But at the end of that year, he told me, Mom, I think in addition to the Bible, every Christian should read Francis Schaeffer's How Should We Then Live? Because he said, at heart, he's a skeptic. And so for him, seeing the reality of every culture, throughout history, if it was not rooted in biblical truth, it devolved into chaos and ultimately death and just, ugliness. And so for him, that was real world evidence of the truth of the Bible and the truth of our need for a savior, and that savior being Jesus Christ. And so again, not all of the benefits are those tangible, college bound benefits. That was an eternal benefit for that son. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity he had there.
So I think, sorry,
no,
I was just going to say, I feel like some of the questions I always get about CC Plus is it going to transfer? Is this actually, is this a real school? Is this, is that something? So Southeastern University is a regionally accredited college, which is, one of the highest standards that they can have. So yes, your child will walk out of their CC Plus experience with an actual transcript from an actual college that they can then submit to another college, and then that college will assess those credits and say, okay, yeah, here is how we are going to take them. Credits themselves typically transfer without a problem. They will, you took 3 credits in this, you will get 3 credits for this. Are they going to transfer into what it is that your child is actually studying? So if you have a child who's going into engineering and they took all of these history courses, well, they might only need 1 history class. So those numbers, those credits will actually transfer, but they won't necessarily transfer towards what their actual degree plan is. So I think that's something, if you do have a student who is college bound and they are going to a 4-year university, you need to start looking at some possibilities for schools and how those credits might actually transfer with what it is that your child might actually want to be doing, and have those conversations with your child. What is it that you're thinking you want to study? Do some of those, what do we call them? I just lost the word.
Core
credits, but also some of those little tests, those
the
aptitude test things, so that so they can start to think about, okay, what is it that I'm actually interested in? I mean, there's a lot of just core general credits that you will find, everybody's going to need a history class, everybody's going to need an English class, so there are some basics that you can be like, okay, I know that I'm going to need this. Is everybody going to need a music theory class? Not necessarily. So you maybe want to stop and think through some of those. I mean, you might just want to take a music theory class because music theory is awesome, because, hey, that was my undergrad. But, is that something that you're going to need? So you do have to kind of start doing some planning ahead of time and kind of thinking through, okay, what is it? I mean, mine was not a math girl. She would be the first to tell you. So she's like, if all I have to do is take this one math class ever, amazing, that's awesome. And she was so happy when she went to her 4-year school. She's like, I don't have to do any math, I'm done. Woo-hoo. So just kind of, you have to be a little proactive with your planning along those lines. If you take every CC Plus class, you might overdo it a little bit. I do get some pushback from my girl every once in a while. She says, you maybe had me take a few too many classes, because when I got to the end, there were a couple of things that I was like, oh, maybe I want to take this, but I already had those credits kind of filled in. But then at the same point in time, she looks and she says, I don't know that I would have wanted to, some of the gen eds that she did still have to take, she was like, I was kind of bored taking those in that 4-year setting. So, you kind of weigh it as of that point and see what it is.
In addition to what Erin's saying, that information is usually published by the college. So you can say we're in Virginia, say you're looking at University of Virginia or George Mason or something. They will have a list of for the different schools. So like you've got, like, say, an engineering school or science school or the liberal arts school, and they will have a list of the required credits before your major for that school.
Towards a degree.
So you can kind of look at that list and be like, okay, they have to take biology, or maybe it will say either science or biology or chemistry or something like that. And so if you're looking and you're pretty sure your child's going down that path or that wants to go to that school, you can start matching those up. They'll do the same with APs. They'll say, you take this AP test, you get this score, we are going to give you this many credits. And Patrick Henry does that. Most schools, if they're going to take some transfer credit, they will have a list like that of what they give credit for. And it's good, I would say, in your sophomore year to start kind of looking at that and just thinking ahead. You don't know always for sure what the end is going to be, but it can help to avoid overdoing it, like Erin said, or you're like, I didn't need to take, 3 science classes from CC plus or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, just being in conversation with your child about and that constant assessment of what their goals are, where they want to be. Erin, you mentioned those aptitude tests. Do you all have an aptitude test that you would recommend?
So we really liked the one from youscience.com. So YOU Science. I think it's a .com. So it's an aptitude test, and it measures aptitude, but it also looks at interests. So it was kind of fun because you play a lot of little, games. They're brain teaser kind of games, and they kind of, look at your aptitudes as of that point. It did cost money. It was between $40 and $50. You can usually find some sort of a coupon code for it online. But it was really neat because it did start to then say, oh, well, hey, you might be interested in this, or you might be interested in that. We laughed because, Ellie had a lot on hers of, you would be a great history professor. And then, that was high on her list, but historian was really low on her list. Or you would be a great architecture professor, but an architect was low on her list. So it's like, oh, maybe you should teach.
Maybe she just needs to be a professor.
Yeah, exactly. But lots of, English related things, it's like, you would be a good lexicographer, the person who writes the dictionary. She's like, oh, there's a job for that. So, I mean, that was like super exciting for her. She's like, this is amazing. So yeah, we really liked that one. And that actually, their website actually then started to show you some schools that you could look at also, that offer some of those degrees that you might be interested in. So that was actually a really good one for us. I mean, there's a lot of free ones that are out there too. Of course, I always get stuck in let's take the free one. And then they're like, send us your email and we'll send you the results. And you're like, oh, I just wasted all my time doing this. So yeah.
Ultimately not free.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So with any of the things that we're talking about, whether it's these aptitude tests, whether it's CC plus, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me and I will be happy to pass along resources for all of those things. And if we don't have more information about this, the CC plus details, can we shift and take a few minutes to talk about that 4-letter word test? Can you all talk about standardized testing, and is it really necessary for our college-bound students?
Oh, do we have to talk about it? Is it?
We should.
I would say
necessary? Yeah, go ahead. You go for it, Emily.
The standardized tests, we've all been taught to hate them and poo-poo them and say they don't capture the whole child. But I think there's a level where you need to be realistic about the fact that you homeschool. And if all you have to show a college about your child's academic readiness is the grades that you subjectively gave them, you can see why the college might be like, I don't know where to put this child because I just have their parents say. So in that vein, standardized tests are one way of confirming the grades that you've given them. If you've given them great grades and they get, more lower end score on the SAT, the college might be scratching their head. So you want the picture that you give the college in terms of your grades that you've given them, their standardized test score, if it's an SAT, ACT, if they take the CLT grade, AP tests, dual credit or in concurrent classes from CC plus. You want the whole picture to match in terms of what give the college. And some colleges have been test optional for the past many years due
Since
to
COVID.
COVID and other factors. But
Yep.
I would say most colleges are bringing standardized test scores back. So probably you should have that in your mind. My kids, I started probably in 10th grade, I started putting standardized test prep things in front of Lou. Not in an intense way, but I would print out, the PSAT and practice PSAT from the College Board website, put it in page protectors and be like, why don't you take this? And there's a lot that they can learn about preparing for those tests. And there's a lot of crossover between the tests. So when you prepare for the CLT, you're also somewhat preparing for the SAT and vice versa, because a lot of them test about grammar rules, many of which CC does not cover explicitly. I mean, it's in the essential stuff, but it's not all covered in class. And I think when you just kind of, treat it like a little bit of another learning opportunity of like, I'm going to watch a bunch of YouTube videos about prepping for the CLT, or I'm going to take an SAT prep course. That is all really, it really does help them. My son, at the end of his senior year, I had signed him up through our local high school for an AP test. And the night before, I think it was AP English language. The night before, he watched some YouTube videos and went in and took it the next day and got a 5. Now, he was
Wow.
good at language. I mean, that was
Mm.
his aptitude. He also took the calculus, and let's just say it was not a 5. It was not a score that I will share. But it's just that wasn't his thing. His thing was language. But you have to sign up a year in advance, and so you know there
That's
you
awesome.
are. But there's a lot of online resources. Khan Academy can really resource them well for free. So I would just say don't wait until 2 weeks before they're about to take the test. Kind of be thinking about learning about the test, and yeah, just treat it as another area that they're learning, because it is a skill to know how to take those
Right.
tests. So
Yeah, and not those tests are valuable not just for colleges seeing the whole picture of our students, but it can also be some incentive for scholarships that are linked to
Yes.
those test scores. What can you all tell me about that?
Well, I know for Ellie, Liberty gives a lot of money to students in general, but there was, hey, if you graduate with, this is your GPA, you get this, amount of money in in an academic scholarship. But if you can show your test scores also, then you get an additional amount of money depending on what the score is. So they can be really helpful for that. And I know a lot of the other scholarship applications that she filled out, it was, what are your test scores? It wasn't like, hey, for this scholarship, it's a test optional scholarship. It's no, we want those scores. So
Right.
So we did that. One thing to think about with some of those tests also is that some of the schools will super score. So they will, you can take the tests as many times as you want, and then they will take your highest math and your highest language all together. And then they'll combine that and they'll say that's what your actual score is, which is really nice. So then you can go and you can take the test again. You're like, okay, I got all the English stuff, which in our case that was, language numbers were off the charts. But when it came to math, there was a little bit more work that had to be done. So yeah, we used Khan Academy, and it was, they have actual tests that you can just go in and you can prep, and it helps with those. But I think this is also a really good spot to say, parents, make sure you're not necessarily always just sending your kids into those tests blind. Let them know what it is that they're going to be expecting. I mean, Ellie walked into her first, I don't remember if it was a PSAT or an SAT, and it was blind. She, had no idea. She's like, I just sat down and I took the test. The scores weren't awful, but, in hindsight, yeah, maybe there should have been a little bit more prep. But I think something, we sometimes have a tendency as parents to be like, oh yeah, my kid's got that, my kid's got that, and thinking they're independent. And a lot of our students really are independent in those things. So we just, as you know, as the teacher, okay, my kid's got that. I don't need to think about, that. And then all of a sudden, you're like, wait, why was this score like this? So it's just that encouragement, parents continue to look over your students' work, and are they really actually getting it? Read through their papers. Have they learned those editing skills? Are they listening? Don't go edit their papers for them and make all of the changes. Circle it and have, you figure out what is actually wrong with this. So you're still staying really involved with your students' work, because that will help them as they go for those standardized tests as well.
Yes, absolutely. All of that, I would just be in agreement with parents. You need to inspect what you expect. And one area that I have found, especially as a challenge tutor, Erin, you mentioned reading through those papers. Continue editing with your child. Your child needs a teacher. Their tutor is not the teacher. And so continue editing with your child their papers all the way through that senior thesis. There was a marked difference for me as a Challenge 2 director in the years that I was in that role. Those students whose parents were actively editing with them versus the students who really were on their own. And I don't know whether their parents even read their paper. So I just really want to encourage each one of you, continue being your child's teacher all the way through their senior year, all the way through Challenge 4. Their ability to communicate, especially in today's digital age, oftentimes the first impression that anyone ever has of our student is something in writing. It's a text, it's a resume, it's an essay, an application, or whatever. And so their ability to communicate in writing in a way that is clear and effective and winsome is so powerful and so important. So yes, that is one of my soapboxes. Please continue editing with your student.
And I will also say, maybe another plug for CC Plus. Your Challenge 4 student will experience senioritis 100%. And writing that senior thesis that last semester, when you are experiencing senioritis, it is really nice to actually have your child getting college credit for that class, so they don't feel like they actually can check out. So I was a Challenge 4 director, and I noticed a marked difference in the senior thesis of the children who were taking the CC Plus class versus those who were not. They were on top of it a lot more, and they were ready to go.
That's great.
Yep.
Emily, do you have any thoughts to add here?
No, I don't. I have a child calling me from the bathroom, so I'm just.
Oh, I'm sorry. Emily, I love that. Okay.
It's just real life,
That's right.
Real homeschool life.
And it's a beautiful thing. All right. Well, let's continue moving through. So we have a plan for testing. What are some of the other things that parents need to keep in mind as they are helping their college-bound child prepare for those college applications?
I'll say, a few practical things. I think we're not going to talk too much about transcripts today, because that's a whole other thing. And there are if you look on the CC events page, there's a lot of, options to learn about transcripts. And, sometimes CC communities will hold an event where they're going to talk about assessing your child and making transcripts. I will just say that CC Connected, if you're a CC member, has a transcript creation tool. It's sort of new. It was there last year, but I think last year was the first year. So it's definitely cool, something to take advantage of, and it makes it a lot easier to create the finished product. You type in the grades, you type in the courses, and boom, it shows up for you. It's not perfect, but it's a great resource. Something else we kind of talked about was thinking about reference letters. So how it's going to work when you apply for college, if the college is, your run-of-the-mill state college, you are going to probably use the Common App, which is a website that creates applications and sends them to the college. And most of the big colleges, I would say, use the Common App. So your child will create an account to create the application. You will create an account as their like counselor, even though you're just the homeschool parent. And so you will have an interface where you are entering in things like, a counselor letter and different things like that. Your child will have an interface where they're putting in an application, and they will also can request reference letters through that. So it sends securely the request to the reference letter writer, and then the letter goes straight to the college. So just know that has changed since we were in college. But I think it's smart to think about who is your child, who would be a good person to write that letter. And there's lots of tips about applying for college. I still get in my social media feeds lots of little like nuggets. Like I get these kind of admissions people from different colleges. I don't know if you get those there, but they'll be like, when I see a bunch of applications and I see this, and they'll rate like volunteers or extracurriculars and say why they're impressive or why they're not impressive. I saw one yesterday that was talking about like, if you can get your child to do something outside of the school realm that shows their demonstrated interest in a future career, that's like
Great.
top of top. I would say, go follow those things, search those out and get them to show up in a social media feed, and that will give you a lot to think about as you think about applying.
And I would echo that, and I would just say document it, because you're not going to remember what your kid did as a ninth grader when they're a 12th grader. So just, make a note. Oh, they were a part of this extracurricular activity. They did this volunteer work. Write it down. How many hours was it? What did they do? So that way they have that information that they can put out there. And yeah, as far as reference letters go, have them try and get a well-rounded picture also. So if they have a job, maybe their boss will write them a letter, have one of their CC tutors write them a letter. If they do volunteer work, have the person who does, the volunteer organization, have them write them a reference letter also. And then, they can tailor those reference letters also to like the different schools that they're applying to, especially if the school doesn't take the Common App. Then they're like, hey, I actually need a reference letter again. That kind of a thing. And it's just, yeah, you just have to think that you have to kind of pre-plan some of those things. It's not something that if you get to your last semester and you're a senior and you're like, oh my goodness, I haven't done any of this stuff, it's possible. You're gonna kick yourself a little bit as to, oh, I really wish we'd done this earlier. So anybody who's listening who's, doing this now, start now, and you'll be happy that you did it ahead of time.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of put in a quick thought about those reference letters, oftentimes we busy moms, we feel bad about asking people to take the time to do those kind of things. But I had a student in the first 2 years that I directed Challenge 2, had a student from each of those classes who afterwards came and asked me to write them a letter. And from my perspective, it really is an honor to have, first of all, to have been able to share that year of conversation with that student, and then to be able to pour some of those ideas and just the uniqueness of that particular child into that letter after the year of beautiful conversations. It really is an honor to do that. So really yes, don't forget about their challenge tutors.
Yep. Yeah.
Any other, Emily, were you going to say something else there?
I don't think so. I think just, when I remember when we were applying to college, it was like, have a lot of clubs, have a lot of, things. And I think now it's very much show me like one really dedicated interest that you have, like that really encapsulates you more than a lot of different
Right.
things going on. Who are you and what are you interested in? And I mean, there's always the annoying thing when you're like, I don't know, I'm just smart and I want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do yet. I'm sorry. But I mean, from all I can see, so if your child has something they just absolutely love and they're really good at,
Mm-hmm.
just showcase that one thing,
That's awesome.
find a way to talk about how this is who they are. And yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and begin to wrap things up. I just want to point out again, as we've discussed, that the path to college isn't a single lane. It's not a single highway. There are many college options and so many different paths to get there. So I want to encourage you to lean into the Lord as you navigate this exciting but sometimes bumpy journey. And Erin had shared with us verse from Proverbs 21:19. I just want to reiterate that many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. So in closing, let's just take a few minutes to share some final advice with parents during their last years of homeschooling their college-bound child. What are some things, let's just list them off, that parents can do to ensure their child's readiness for college and beyond, if that's the path that their child takes?
I would really re-emphasize what you said, Amy, about editing papers. I had a friend who's a super smart lawyer lady tell me recently, I was like, how do you think people get better at their writing? And she's manages a bunch of lawyers and, is very smart. And she said, I think just by having their work edited. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, good. Gonna keep doing that. So for sure. And if you feel ill-equipped to do this, ask a friend who seems smart and writer-ish. That, I won't say that everybody is like brilliant with language, but you should be able to ask other parents, like, do you like to edit? Are you good at it? Can you help me? You can
That's
read
part of
Strunk
our
and White for
community.
yourself. They read that. What is that challenge too? Read
Yes.
Strunk and White, get better at language on yourself, and then reinforce that with your student. It's enormously helpful. Staying involved. I think a lot of the times we're overwhelmed and we can be a little checked out. We think our child has got it,
Mm-hmm.
but continuing to push them is what is going to prepare them for college. You don't want them to take it easy and then they get to college and they are just like, wow. I
Sure.
think, my son, I asked him, in thinking about this call we were doing, I said, what do you think is the most valuable things that you did in CC that have prepared you for your college experience now? And he said logic, studying logic. So don't let them check out when it comes to logic. Doing all the debating and speaking, he
Mm-hmm.
felt was enormously helpful. When he first got there, his first few weeks, he said, I am kind of the only one right now that's like comfortable with talking in class. He's like, it seems like the other kids are just more hesitant to talk. And he said, I mean, they ramped up really quick and he was like, they're in the flow now. But just from his education, he was just very comfortable with speaking. I think, yeah, just the essays. Oh, and he said learning to write. So logic, debating and speaking, and learning to write was enormously helpful to him. And so I think, as you go through CC, when you're focusing on those areas that teach your children how to study, how to memorize, how to think critically and analyze well, don't skip and on those things. Don't like take a back seat when it comes to making sure they have those critical skills.
Yeah, and so
Well,
what I'm hearing there, just real quick, what I'm hearing there, you saying, Emily, is really he benefited from those classical skills that
Yeah.
were honed in him during his
Yeah.
CC years. Those
Yes.
skills of acquiring information, for wrestling with that information, to think critically about it, organizing it, and then presenting it, whether in writing or whether speech and debate. but presenting that in an effective, a clear and a winsome way.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that is, I was going to say the same thing, that it's, we've been giving our children a classical education. Do they know what the components of that classical education are so they can take it forward with them? Do they understand, that you load in the grammar, because you have to understand the terms and the vocabulary first before you can wrestle with the ideas in the dialectic, before you can actually present your own thoughts on it. So make sure that they understand this is the education that they've been given. Yes, you've been walking in it, but can you actually walk from above it and see what it is so you can mimic it when you go away? Because, if your kid's not going to a classical school, all of a sudden they're walking into a modern education arena, and you want them to be able to take those classical tools that they've been walking through and actually make sure that they recognize this is really how I learn here. And I will say that one thing that Ellie has told me multiple times, over and over, like, what is one thing to make sure that your student walks away from their CC education with the knowledge of? She says, make sure that they know how to plan. CC gives us lots of opportunity to practice our time management skills. We have lots of assignments and lots of things, but that actual sitting down and writing out your assignments in a planner and breaking up your time, and, oh, how am I going to do this? And what else do I have that's going on in my life? And being able to schedule those things. Our guides, they lay out assignments, but they don't necessarily say day by day by day, unless you go to, online to one of those moms who's maybe done it for you. But maybe you want to make sure that you aren't also always going to those moms online who have done it for you, because you want to make sure that your child walks out with the skill of being able to do it for themselves. So sit down next to your kid and actually take the planner, and, when they're younger, start writing in the planner yourself. Okay, how do we want to break this up and keep them involved in it, and, write through it, and then start to give them pieces and pieces of the planner. So by the time they get to challenge 2, 3, and 4, they're actually doing that themselves. So when they walk into college, they're like, oh yeah, I know how to manage this. I'm not going to be the kid who stays up until, 4 o'clock in the morning, writing the essay that needs to be done. Sure, maybe they should have that experience every once in a while too. But, they don't have to have that experience, because they've figured out how to do those hard things, read 21 novels, and write a senior thesis, and do all of the things, do this in a semester, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm glad that she pointed that out. And every child is different. Most of us, I would say, spend the Challenge A year with our child, helping them develop their plan each week for their school work. Some children need longer than that year. Some children need through Challenge B, through Challenge 1. But yes, as they get into those upper levels, really transitioning so that they are putting together their schedules. That's the goal there. Great. Well, thank you both so much. I want to go ahead and wrap us up first with another verse from Proverbs. And this one is Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So I'm going to take just a minute, and I just want to pray for anyone who is watching, anyone who may watch this recording down the road. Just want to take a minute and pray for you and your college-bound student. Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for your sovereignty and your love for us, Lord, your love for our children, even more than we are possibly able to do. And Lord, I just want to lift up each one of the parents who are listening to this and are looking ahead and perhaps feeling overwhelmed at the enormity of what the journey ahead looks like. Lord, I just would ask that you would comfort their hearts and give them peace. Help them to rest in you, Lord. Help them to rest in your sovereignty, Lord, knowing that it's you that sets the path for their child. Lord, give them the strength and the energy to prepare their children and just give them the encouragement through community, through their tutors, Lord, through one another, that they are the teacher that you, through your design, chose for their child, Lord, and to just rest in that comfort. And Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity. I ask that you would just help us to honor you in all of our parenting and all of our homeschooling, and in our CC conversations. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Emily. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. I would be more than happy to put you in touch with either one of these ladies to talk further or just share resources with you. Thank you.